Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Special Council Budget Meeting on January 16th, 2023. We are now live on YouTube. I'll start with a roll call of council. I, Mayor Shantz, am present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Bryant.
Present.
Councillor Burgess.
Present.
Councillor Cadeau.
Present.
Councillor Grant.
Present.
And Councillor Schwint.
Present.
Thank you. I need a motion that council reconvenes in open session. Moved by Councillor Cadeau, second by Councillor Schwint. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I acknowledge the land on which we live has been here from time immemorial, as have the Indigenous people who lived here, who still live here. I thank the Shinaton and also the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee people who have lived here and cared for this land and who continue to share and steward this land with us. May we together learn to care for each other, our flora and fauna, and the land that sustains us. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. We will jump right into our budget presentation, and we're going to start with the CAO operating budget, and then we'll call on Chief Administrative Officer David Brenneman and Economic Development and Tourism Officer Jenna Morris, who are here with us this evening to introduce the CAO operating budget. Mr. Brenneman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to council, we'll just have a presentation for, I'll start and then Jenna will finish. And then we'll have time for questions. So next slide. So I just wanted to remind council from something we discussed in orientation. Our structure is such that there are two divisions of the corporation that do report directly to the CAO's office, and that is for economic development and tourism, and also for fire services. You previously had a presentation from our fire chief and deputy fire chief. So this evening we'll just be covering off the CAO's administration portion of the budget and also economic development and tourism. Next slide. So I'll make it real easy on council. There's really only one major budget change that you would have seen with respect to the CAO's budget for this year. I'm strongly recommending that as a corporation, we go through an update to our strategic plan. Actually, I think we should create a new strategic plan. And that for the first time, I think we should get some outside assistance. This is not uncustomary in the field. It's very customary in the field of municipal work for cities, towns, townships to get support. And I mentioned this because of the fact that, ultimately, this is one of the most important documents that council will ultimately go through as a process and ultimately adopt. It certainly is your long-term vision for what you would like to see accomplished. I'll have a separate report, though, on this subject for council so that you support the process and things of that nature. But obviously with this part being part of the budget process, it does have to come up at this stage to draw to your attention that I think we should have some outside engagement through a facilitator. One of the things I did want to highlight, because you've heard it throughout the process, is what changed from the original submission to now. I had put a lot more money in the budget to do a lot more detailed community assessment, that ultimately would do a lot of background research, meetings with a lot of our community agencies, support groups, residents, business, things of that nature. Not that we wouldn't do that as part of a scaled down process, but certainly a lot more extensive process. Because one of the things I talked with the last council about was the fact that, the last council was concerned, and be interested in your opinion, ultimately is, the strategic plan that we have in place now is a lot more of the regular type that a lot of municipalities do. And dare I say, with a longish mission statement, a longish vision statement that people have trouble remembering, and so many priorities and focuses that you often lose track of if not for our tracking system that we have, what actually has been accomplished, where are we at with things. So there was a lot of talk with the last council. I look forward to the same with this council around, trying to do something, and this is becoming more and more commonplace, where in sometimes 2 or 3 pages, you've got everything that needs to be said there in terms of a nice short brief mission statement, a nice short and sweet vision statement, a listing of the key values that are most important to us in the community, and ultimately a couple of pages of very succinct, keep it simple, objectives and areas of focus that you wish to have. So I wanted to get into that level of detail tonight, just because, as I said, it's in advance of a formal report to council, and I want to bring a report forward because I also know that there may be some differences of opinion as to when we might start the process, especially since you're new council, and what would we look to accomplish this year in terms of any sort of engagement, if any, or background research and context, that sort of thing. I would note that for the most part, the CAO's budget is status quo, because in building the budget and talking with our director of finance, you would have seen in the budget for the revenue, there's a $40,000 offsetting amount from the operating contingency to cover off this particular cost. And that's very customary as well in these sorts of situations, because the strat plan is not something we do on an annual basis. It's a special project, and it's a good source to help us mitigate the overall budget. So that's really all that is a significant change. It's covered through the operating contingency, but that's the only major change, in terms of the CAO's operating budget.
Okay, are there questions? Councillor Cadell.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the CAO. I'm just wondering, you said that this hasn't been updated for a while. Can you state when it was last updated first? And has it ever been updated with the assistance of an external contractor? Yeah.
So I'll start with the last part. To the best of my knowledge, it's never been updated with the support of an outside facilitator or a consultant, like a lot of other municipalities do. Certainly with my background and experience coming to Woolwich, I was comfortable. We have done it. We have done a number of updates. But what I did do with one of the previous councils was I got their support for actually developing something that's different for us compared to other municipalities, and that is that there's a lot of councils, and again, this may be something that you do wish to do, is develop a strategic plan that is specifically tied to this term of council. I'm not a fan of that, because I believe if you're truly doing a good community strategic plan, you're looking longer. And so our current strategic plan was to run to 2020. And we would have normally started the process in the last term of council. But the last term of council, the members said wisely, a little bit concerned about trying to do community engagement in the midst of a pandemic. And for that matter, how it might have skewed the input that you might get in terms of people's perspectives in the midst of a pandemic. So it's not that we've never updated. My apologies if I misspoke earlier. I have myself led, with the support of my executive officer, a number of the processes. But ultimately, I think what a facilitator I've seen, because I participated in some of the other city or regional processes, is it allows for all of us to participate effectively by having somebody independently facilitate all of the various meetings, not just with council, staff, but also the community. I think it'll lead to a much more efficient and effective process. And I think it will also be important to tailor any sort of RFP process to somebody that's willing to look in an innovative way at doing something different, more along the lines of what I described earlier.
Just as a follow-up, do you think that with the $40,000, you would be able to accomplish something like that? I mean, it says here on the slide, that's a reduction of $80,000 from what you had initially thought about with this particular study.
Yeah, for what we're asking of the individual, I think I'm comfortable that will be an amount, because as I said, scaled back the expectations of what we would be going out to the marketplace for, right? We're not necessarily looking for somebody to do more than to facilitate the process and also be more of a guide. And I know I've had enough conversations in the last term of council that sometimes the most economical and best way to do something is where you have an outside consultant maybe assisting in terms of guiding and facilitating the process, but we still do a lot of the heavy lifting.
Anyone else? Councillor Schwinn.
Just following up on that, I like the idea of a facilitator to bring out ideas. But I would think that the report is better written in-house, because with that in-house expertise that understands Woolwich Township, and it'd be more of a local flavor, I'll call it. And my other comment is I hate disagreeing with an accountant, but I guess I do struggle a little bit pulling this from reserves. I think too often it's the easy thing for councils to do is pull money out of reserves to pay for ongoing expenses. And all of a sudden reserves are gone and we're faced with hard decisions. So there's a few things in this budget I think maybe are better off being put in operating and paid in today's funds, and just recognize that cost up front.
Okay, Richard, did you want to respond? Mr. Patrick.
Absolutely. So thank you. Good question. Through you, Madam Mayor. I think in this particular case, I think as Mr. Brennan was indicating, this is kind of one of those one time or like a time of an expense that may occur once every 3 or 4 years. And it's not something we wanted to build into the budget so that we're actually raising the 40,000 in 1 year. And then the next year it's like, we don't, we may place it somewhere else. There's obviously lots of needs. And then of course, 3 years later, we're going to build another 40,000 up. I mean, there are alternatives we can look at. One would be, we would, include it within the levy requirement. But I would say if we had some specific things that we know we're going to be able to use it for, say for like 2 or 3 years, and then that year 4, when we're doing it again, we just stop doing that and pull it back over. That's always an option too. Yeah, but I definitely hear what you're saying. Yeah, you do have to be careful with how much you're relying on your reserves for sure.
Anyone else? Okay.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Jenna Morris then, our Economic Development and Tourism Officer.
Hey, good evening. So the 2023 Economic Development and Tourism budget within the CAO's budget aims to support our business retention and expansion efforts, as well as continued economic recovery initiatives with a focus on the tourism sector. Specifically related to the St. Jacobs brand audit and wayfinding project that we started in 2022. To accomplish the department's 2023 work plan, we would like to extend our business retention and expansion coordinator contract for 1 year, pending grant funding, to support with projects related to the 2022 comprehensive business retention and expansion project and forthcoming action plan. We do want to maintain our existing partnerships with Waterloo Economic Development Corporation, or WEDC, Smart Waterloo Region, and Explore Waterloo Region. And we're just going to continue to partner with the industry to ensure we're collaborating wherever possible so we can cost share and or leverage as many funding programs as possible, which we've been trying to do over the last 3 years. So yeah, fairly status quo, hoping to keep the contract position and keep on chipping away at our recovery efforts. I don't think there's any other slides. Is there another slide?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so these are some of the projects that will fit under our recovery efforts and our business retention and expansion projects. And I think that's pretty much, for the most part, it's status quo. So if there's any questions, I can take them on.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Through you to Jenna. In your budget paper copy, it's page 7. You mentioned 50% funding for this, the contract. What happens if you don't get the funding?
Unfortunately, we would have to cut the contract short. We're fairly confident that we would get the funding because we've got some great partners in the industry who have the same priorities as us for these efforts, but
Okay, so without funding, then that's gone from the
Yeah.
budget line.
it is, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
absolutely pending the funding.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks through you, Mayor. This can be to Jenna or to David, sorry. I don't know which one of you want to take it on, but I'm just looking at the full-time equivalents. Looking at the expenditures, looking at the revenues. And boy, I would love to see more programs have revenues that almost break even with expenditures. Is that something that's scalable in this office if we were to look to pursue additional FTEs, for example?
So I'll start and I'm sure Jenna will want to add. Couple of comments. One, I do want to use this opportunity to compliment Jenna, that she's been an absolute star in terms of leveraging funding that's available out there from either the province through the Rural Economic Development program or even through support of Waterloo Wellington Community Futures. However, what we're starting to see at times is even those organizations pivot in terms of what they're doing. So I don't feel it's sustainable, to say that we'll always be able to attract an appropriate level of funding to pay for half or all of some of the salaries. I don't think that is realistic. However, when you look at the broader economic development and tourism budget, I think what is more realistic is whether it's through the federal government, the provincial government, or some of the other agencies I've mentioned, there are opportunities to be able to supplement and leverage our initiatives with programs. Even I forgot to mention the Regional Tourism Organization, which is a provincial funding, receives provincial funding. They do a lot of partnerships with Jenna. So I think there's opportunities more so beyond the staff level to ensure that we're applying for any available funding out there to help lower the ultimate impact on the tax levy, which I think is our ultimate goal in terms of trying to get alternative funding. Jenna, is there anything you want to add?
I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. We're constantly looking to leverage our existing budget so that we can get external funding as much as possible. We need the manpower absolutely to execute the projects, but constantly every year, every opportunity that comes across our desk, we're looking to leverage what we are doing existing.
Anyone else? Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thanks. And next is financial services, and I will turn the floor over to Director of Financial Services and Treasurer Richard Petherick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to pull up my presentation and share my screen with council.
While you're doing that, I'll also say thank you to Jenna for all the work she does, and she's been a great asset to the township and to the local businesses. So thank you.
So through you, Madam Mayor, just want to quickly go over my budget with council, and then it's just a few slides, and then I should be able to pass that over and get any questions that council may have. So you would have seen this when we went through our orientation, that the financial services department is made up of 3 areas: management and budget, which is one of the items. What we're doing tonight is budget. The other is payroll within that area. And then accounting and revenue includes our taxation department. So some of the major changes that we're seeing in the 2023 draft budget, again, I think we talked about it last Monday in the first budget meeting, is an inclusion of an additional 1.5% in the infrastructure levy. So that transfer to the infrastructure reserve fund is contained within the management and budget in the financial services budget. And that is generating an additional $193,000. And I think, as I said last week, the council, that is completely within your control, or whether you want to include 1.5 or something in a variation. And something I believe I said last week is that additional 193,000, we haven't built it anywhere into the budget because we didn't want to assume that council was going to endorse an additional 1.5%. So if council decides to do something different, it is not going to affect our work plans that we have in our draft 2023 budget. It would just help in our future budgets. The other one is a decrease in our debenture repayments. You would see that again in the management and budget area. What happened in 2022, we had 2 10-year, I would say, debentures for our hot mix repaving program. One matured in 21, the second one matured in 22. However, what we did as part of the 2021 budget was we included some internal debenturing. And so that repayments started in 2022. But again, as I said, one matured. But one of the things that the previous council also did was they had it within, or we still have it within our development charges bylaw, that any affordable housing development that comes forward, they would be exempt from development charges. And so that did happen. We have a development in St. Jacobs. So the way the provision is that we have to fund that. That is a cost of about $12,000. Thankfully, through the I would say the previous development charge act changes, it actually allowed us to have that repayment go over 20 years. Now, I know the current DC bylaw amendment that came forward as part of Bill 23 actually now has all affordable housing DCs exempt across the province. But of course, this one happened in 2021, so we've included that repayment. The other one is, you would see with the increase in the interest rates that have occurred, that would actually transpire in additional investment income that we would see coming in as a revenue source for our department and for the corporation as a whole. And I project that to be an increase of $52,000. So really that is the major changes I want to highlight to council, and I'd be happy to take any questions that council may have. I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Councillor Bryant.
Yeah. Thank you. Through you to Mr. Patrick. When we're dealing with debentures, are they a set rate for the full term of that debenture, or do they vary like a mortgage every 5 years they come due and we have to set a new rate?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, they are set for the term. Yeah, so whether we take a 10-year or 15 or 20-year term, it is set for the term.
For the full term. Okay, and can I have one follow-up? Under revenue, is that what was Waterloo North Hydro, I guess now Nova or whatever they're calling themselves?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. So under the management and budget area, there's a revenue line for Waterloo North Hydro that is the new, what would be the new ANOVA. Going at least forward in 2023, we will still be receiving dividends from that investment that we hold because we are a shareholder, as well as we do have, it's called a junior debt, but it's a junior debt to them, but it's an investment to us. So we actually receive interest income on that. So that hasn't changed. We had that under the old Waterloo North Hydro, and that still continues on in the new entity.
So with this changeover, are we anticipating seeing more revenue or less revenue from that particular item?
So through you, Madam Mayor, the anticipation is that with the merger, they will be seeing some cost savings. And so the new entity is allowed to retain those cost savings for the first 10 years. After that, they would have to do another rate filing, and those savings would have to go back into the ratepayers. Right now, I would anticipate we are going to be seeing some increases as we go along. And as council, you as council, would even make some decisions whether we want to see that included within the my area. And so therefore would actually see an increase in revenue. The previous council was looking at it that we wanted to kind of have a status quo so that any new revenues that we may received above and beyond the budget would go into a reserve fund. But that may be a discussion, I think, when we get into it with council, that I think when we finally see those additional revenues, I can bring that back to council and we can have that discussion.
Thank you.
My feeling on this is that I'd like to see more of that dividend piece go into a reserve fund rather than operating. We did get caught a few years ago when Hydro was looking to decrease dividends, and they didn't in the end, but I think that would be a better cushion, but how we go about making that change would be something that we need to discuss. Councillor Schwinn.
Thank you, Mayor Schatz, through you. I know the department's looking at new accounting software. Can you refresh my memory on timelines for that? And is that something the township is looking at doing on our own? Or would it make sense to find partners or other municipalities, kind of like the buying group we have, to make sure we get a common platform?
Absolutely. So through you, Madam Mayor, that budget line is contained for the rest of council to make sure that we're all on the same page, is under the information technologies capital budget. So we have a provision within 2023. It was actually in 2022, and unfortunately, due to staffing resources, I was not able to sort of move that forward. Still, so I pushed it into 2023, and it's a $200,000 budget line. So what the process is that we would be going out for an RFP to search to see what kind of software vendors that we have available to us and what costing that would be. And then we'd sort of be bringing a report back to council. In the meantime, I am aware of another municipality that I believe is still looking for a financial software, and I would have to reach out to them just to see where they are in that process and see if we can partner and see if we can find some cost synergies and cost savings if we start a partner on any kind of an implementation and a purchase. We do belong to a couple of cooperative purchasing groups, I can tell you, and unfortunately, that is not one of the offerings that they have. I wish they did, but they do not. Yeah, it is a very small field of software companies that actually provide services for municipal finance, at least from our size.
Councillor Cadell.
Thanks. Just to follow up on that. When I'm looking at the software packages, I'm wondering, I did have a question and now it's escaping me. Oh, I'm just wondering, do you know what's used at the regional level? If there could be any efficiencies found from that angle?
To you, Madam Mayor. I remember seeing it, and I want to say GW Edwards, but I could be mistaken on that. And if I would say if any regional employee happened to be watching, I'm sure they're going to tell me what exactly they are using. But I believe it is a program that, from I would call it an annual maintenance perspective, is probably well above the 200,000 that we're looking at utilizing to implement. Typically, the region and the cities have programs that need to be much higher and sophisticated. I think they're generally run on an Oracle type of database. And unfortunately for us, we just do not have the staffing level. I like Barry. I don't really want to press him too hard, as well as the financial resources to be able to accommodate something like that. So that's why there are software packages that kind of play within our field as well, like our size.
I'm not seeing any other questions. Thank you. And thank you too for all the work you do in keeping us on track at the budget. Next, we're over to corporate services. We have Director of Corporate Services, Jeff Smith, Deputy Clerk Alex Smith, spelled differently, not related. Manager of IT, Barry Girth, and Human Resources Specialist, Shelley Noble, to talk about corporate services operating budget. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Sorry, we're just getting ready here. I think our presentation is up. So you can we can put that on the screen and we'll start. So this is the corporate services division. And just while that slideshow is coming up, the second slide there, we'll sort of go through the different divisions and budget lines that you are looking through. There they are now. So we're looking at the grants budget, the clerk's budget, IT division budget, that's both operating and capital, bylaw enforcement, crossing guards, corporate resources, and corporate overhead. And we'll go to the next slide, and I'll just ask Alex Smith, Deputy Clerk, if she can provide an overview of the grants budget and the recommendation in the report that was attached to the agenda tonight.
Thank you, Jeff. Council, as you can see on the screen and within report CO1 2023 annual grants recommendations for 2023, staff were able to recommend that most of the 2023 grant applications received are granted, staff are able to recommend that most of the applications received do receive the grants that they requested. These amounts are included in your draft budget in the agenda package for this evening's discussion and on the screen in front of you. When developing the grants budget, staff used the previous year's budget as a starting point. Following the application period, staff review each request through the lens of the Township's grants and special assistance policy, which outlines eligibility factors. All applicants need to be charitable or nonprofit organizations who work to meet the needs of the residents of Woolwich. Staff specifically look at the work of the organization and whether that work meets the need for Township residents. Staff also consider whether the work of an applicant is a duplication. For example, the programs offered by Food for Kids Waterloo Region is very similar to the work of Woolwich Community Services. Council wisely suggested in December to the delegate from Food for Kids Waterloo Region to look into partnership opportunities. Since December, both organizations have met and are in the works of collaborating together to meet the needs of children in Woolwich who do not have enough to eat. As such, Food for Kids Waterloo Region has requested to withdraw their application. Another requirement staff look for when reviewing applications is how many residents would be impacted by the programs. This is often the reasoning that staff recommend declining a grant request. With the 2023 applications received, staff are of the mind that the Junior Achievement of Southwestern Ontario program does not serve a suitable number of Woolwich residents to merit the requested grant. There are other times when the number of grant applications received are more than the funds available. In these circumstances, staff rely on using their best judgment to review the activities of all applications in order to make these hard decisions. When it came to the request of the Three Sisters Center in St. Jacobs, staff are of the mind that the request, while a great benefit to the community, does not meet an essential need compared to the other applications received for the 2023 budget. Staff also note that the center has applied for the past 2 years and has been granted monies towards both of those requests. Finally, staff received another application withdrawal since the draft budget was finalized in December of 2022. The Elmira Homecoming 100th Anniversary Committee notified staff that after many efforts, a committee was unable to be established. As such, the applicant requested to withdraw their application as well. With this withdrawal and that of Food for Kids Waterloo Region, staff note that $6,000 are left for council's direction. That being said, there will be a slide at the end of the corporate services budget presentation where staff will request direction from council regarding the $6,000. For now, I would be happy to answer any questions regarding the draft grants budget before Jeff continues with the clerk's budget.
Any questions? Councillor Schwint?
Just to clarify on that remaining $6,000, my understanding that staff have another budget line for discretionary grants up to a certain maximum. Does that just roll into that budget or is it separate lines?
So yes, we have a miscellaneous budget line that if it is council's desire, they can reallocate the funds to that budget line if they so desire. Just to kind of provide Councillor Schwint, sorry, through you, Mayor Shantz, with some other alternatives. Council, this is your budget and you can do with it as you wish. You could reallocate, as Councillor Schwint has asked, reallocate those funds within the grants budget. That could be to the miscellaneous budget line. It could be to other grant requests. You could also reallocate it elsewhere in the budget. And you could also not reallocate those funds and therefore reduce the budget.
Anyone else? I'm not seeing anything else. So, Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. So getting into the clerk's division budget, mostly status quo here, and you're going to hear that a little bit in our department. Not too many changes on our side. Some of the biggest work plan items we've had on our plates this year is finishing up the election. There's still a little bit more work to do on that, and working through hybrid meetings. We've been doing that for some time. And we've been trying to do it without adding any staff as well, but big thank you to the IT department who helps us out and on the technology side of that. But it is a little bit more work for staff. You'll see that we've added a small part-time salary for some records management work. That's for doing some work with a grant that we've received on document digitization. So we've received a municipal modernization grant for that. So this work is for anything that is not eligible under that. So some more routine records management maintenance type work. We've included in our communications budget under the website maintenance line, a new public engagement software called Engage Woolwich. And actually we were happy to launch that just a couple of days ago with content, more and more content going online shortly. I'm very happy that we're first township to do that along with our city and regional partners. I wanted to mention that the communications line under social media includes all of our costs, which used to be spread out across all departments for social media support software. And then, as I mentioned before, we aren't finished with the election, so there are some additional funds to complete the election and orientation, finish orientation for council, and that is about $7,500 that'll be funded from the election reserve fund. If there are any questions about clerks specifically, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any question on clerks? I'm not seeing any questions.
All right, I think next we're going to have Barry Girth, manager of IT, and he's going to give you an overview of the IT operating and capital budgets.
Mr. Girth.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. So for the IT operating and IT capital, it is fairly straightforward this year. Try not to make too many waves going year over year. One of the big things, or one of the things that is kind of new to consider this year is the backup internet service for the admin building and the WMC. So just to get some background here, we had two internet service disruptions in 2022. One being earlier in the year due to a fiber cut, and then the other one due to the Rogers internet service disruption that most of Canada felt. So there was discussion as to whether or not it was time to consider having a secondary internet service here at the admin building. So there were a number of options that were considered. The one that was being proposed is a lightweight option to basically give staff a modest amount of internet service to do their basic needs. And that annual cost would look to be about $1,000 adding to the operating budget. For the capital, again, it's still pretty status quo. We have PC replacements. There's a copy replacement for the WMC, as well as some battery backup replacements for the WMC as well. Again, as Director of Finance has indicated, new financial software, that budget has been put into our IT capital. So that is some funding that's being added into there as well. I will just say from a capital perspective, there are some larger budget years that are coming down the pipe. There are some, again, server replacements, which are higher cost, as well as some other infrastructure that should be looked at or considered to be replaced. So as we look at year over year budget preparations, we do need to consider how we can smooth those bigger years out. So from going from our current budget allocation of $69,000 to, you know, 120, 130, 140, it's hard to plan for without having money set aside for those. So we had considered starting to build up our total capital budget this year and start to move things into reserve so we could pull it out for the bigger years. But due to budget constraints and direction, that has been pulled for this year. But it is something that we have to discuss a little further and see how we can prepare for those larger budget years without without strapping everybody. So, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them as best I can.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is for the Director of Finance. So I'm wondering if I should pause and just see if there's any questions for IT before I continue.
Okay. Are there any questions for IT? Go ahead.
Thank you. So through you to the Director of Finance, I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about the software that you're proposing. So in the budget line here, is it the 14,985 that's going to be covering that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's actually 200,000 is what's currently in the, that's what we had in the 2022 budget, and we carried it forward into the 23 budget. So under the software line in the capital IT, it's 200,000, and it's being funded from grants that we received in the past, as well as from the water and sewer reserve funds, because there's a component of a software that would have water sewer billing to it.
Sorry, as a follow-up, is it entirely being funded from there, or?
Yeah, so right now, through Madam Mayor, the 200,000, we'd be looking as we go through an RFP. We're looking that to, I would say, pay for the initial license as well as the implementation cost that would be charged by the vendor of choice. But as I said to council, we will be going through an RFP process, and those results would be coming forward back to this council to approve that purchase. So right now, it's just a provision in the budget, and we'll see where the cost land. My suspicion is 200,000 may be light, but we'll see that, and that's why we go through a process.
Sure. One more question, if I may. Can you just speak to the need for this? If it's been pushed off from last year, can you speak to the need for it this year?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, it was pushed off. I think, as I said earlier, just from a staffing resource perspective, to be able to go through the proper investigation to do, I would say, a fulsome RFP document, so that any respondents can be able to respond appropriately with appropriate costing. So that takes that level of effort to be able to do. We do have a couple of examples from other municipalities, surprisingly not as many as I would like. But we'll make do and come up with a good product to go out for an RFP. I think once that comes back, we'll do that evaluation. But I would say the other reason why it was even proposed in last year's budget, and of course, why we still want to continue on doing it, is our existing software. I would say that we have very much grown to its max. I would say it is starting to be beyond or too small for what we need. We've run into a couple of issues where, we've had to rely on Barry and his team to come down and kind of help us sort a couple of things out, because it is in a access type of database that's been modified to work in a SQL environment. But the database is just too big for what we're doing, because we are a growing municipality. We have a lot of records. And a couple of times when we have phoned the support, they go into the back end, look at all of our data. And a lot of times we get a comment, especially from new support agents that come on board and take a look. They're like, wow, you have a lot of data. And so to them, they're, we've even been approached by them and said, have you thought about actually upgrading? So yeah, we're definitely at that point. We feel it.
Anyone else before we move on to HR? Councillor Kiddo.
Sure, thanks. I'll just throw it. It just kind of popped into my mind, but can you speak to, like, say we didn't proceed with that? How would it impact the customers of Woolwich versus if we did proceed with the complete new build? How would you see, the residents of Woolwich being impacted? Can you speak to that a little?
Sure. So through you, Madam Mayor, right now, I would say there has been very little impact to our ratepayers and our customers. The reason being is because, I would commend staff, not only in my department, but also from IT, to be able to stick handle and manage some of the hiccups that we've been experiencing. I mean, it will obviously get to a crunch point. But ultimately, I think one of the things we're looking at, even from a new program, is to push us further into providing better customer service, a better platform. I think this current provider is probably not investing as much as they could. And I think it's because it's not meant for somebody our size. As I said, we're just growing too much for it. But definitely a new program, we're looking to be able to actually enhance our customer experience. That is one of the goals that I would like to see, is to provide better opportunities for clients to be, or customers to be able to, do more self-service, have more options of touch points, have better access to data. That's kind of what we're trying to aim for.
Thank you.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Through to Mr. Pester. With the new software, would you have the ability then to send out e-bills to customers for water like you would get from, I don't know, pretty much everybody now? They send you emails telling you what your current balance is on your bills versus getting paper billing.
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, we currently have that ability with our current software. So both water and tax, you can get an e-bill. There is some limitations to it. That's why I said it's not like the most user-friendly, but you actually can get it. So at the very least, you don't have to have something lost in the mail or sent out by paper, and you can, be that eco-friendly and receive a notification that there's a bill waiting for you.
So it does send you an email currently saying that you have a bill there for you to use.
Yep.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that because not everybody understands that part of it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thanks, Mr. Girth, and thank you for keeping our equipment running. Did you want to introduce Shelley? Or?
Actually, if you don't mind, Mayor Shantz, can I talk about bylaw enforcement, and then we'll go to HR after that.
Go ahead.
So again, bylaw enforcement, mostly status quo here. We are looking at, or we did include additional evening and part-time evening and weekend coverage in about $3,000. Definitely there's a community request, community demand for increasing our level of service. And we've sort of been rolling that out sort of little by little, increasing as we can. So that's in there. You may notice our fuel and repairs line is a little off with supply chain shortages and lead times. We ordered a vehicle in the very start of 2022, still haven't received it yet, but are very much hoping that we'll get it this year. And you should see those lines come back into sort of more what we would expect. Revenues are up slightly. Again, we've increased our evening and weekend coverage for overnight winter parking. And we've increased our reminders and emphasis on dog tag sales. So we really do want to promote that to the community. You are required to get a dog license. And of course, if you do have a dog license and we find your dog, first ride home is free. So that really does help support the program. And we've been pushing that out. So, you know, congratulations to staff on getting more people signed up for their dog tags. One thing that council did ask some other departments about is what isn't in the budget or what you would have included if you were able to. And I think one of the biggest things that we didn't include was a manager of bylaw enforcement or a supervisor of bylaw enforcement. As the director, I'm directly responsible for supervising the officers. There's definitely a need to have that management level there. It was not in the cards this year, just with the other increases that we were looking at, but it is something on our radar if we want to really bring forward some of the higher level projects that we want to look at. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions from council.
Council, any questions on bylaw? Councillor Bryant.
Through you too, Mr. Smith. You currently use the KW Humane Society for your animal control. Do you use them for wildlife control as well, if you've got sick animals or whatnot?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, the Humane Society provides compassionate wildlife services. What that means is that they'll go out if and when they can. So if there's an active call for a lost pet, they'll go to the pet before they go to the wildlife. If the wildlife is trapped, if it's stuck somewhere, that's easy for them to get to because they can do it. If the wildlife is periodically visiting your property and doing something you don't want, that's something that may not respond to. But basically included in our contract is a compassionate service where an officer is available for wildlife.
So if you have a raccoon with distemper, they would come out and deal with that particular issue, or is that not something they deal with?
So again, through you, Mayor Shantz, probably case by case basis on that one.
Okay.
Distemper, if the raccoon is in a location where it's not getting away,
Right.
then they know if they dispatch an officer, the raccoon's probably still going to be there when they get here. If it's climbing across the fence and sort of stumbling from one property to the next, by the time an officer gets out here, they may not know where it is. So it would probably be situation dependent. Better luck getting service if, or you're more likely to get service, sorry, if the animal is contained, or I should say, a safety concern for your family.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Schwint.
Following up the Humane Society contract, can you give us an indication how many calls or how many dogs or cats are boarded or picked up or use the service on an annual basis?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz. I actually haven't seen those statistics come through yet, so I can get those for council. What I can tell you is that we used to take in all of our animal control calls. The Humane Society acted for the township as a pound, so we would take the call, we would pick up the stray animal and then deliver it to the Humane Society if we couldn't find who the owner was, through that dog tag program that's working really, really well. When we switched over to the Humane Society being our animal control services as well, we did notice our call volume on animal control go down quite a lot. But what I can do is I can get those stats for council and I'll send them to you by email.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
If I just go to the next slide, this is a pretty quick and simple one. There's no major changes to our crossing guard budget. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions on crossing guards? No, I'm not seeing any.
Thank you. Then I will turn it over to Shelley Noble, our Human Resources Generalist, to take you through the HR budget.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Due to increasing workload demands, HR has been relying on help from various corporate staff members to meet the demands, especially in the area of recruitment. However, this has not been captured in past budgets. So this year staff have reallocated HR funds for HR admin and project support, and this will allow us to provide better internal services to our staff. Line 2, both equity, diversity and inclusion and mental health and wellness have been identified as corporate initiatives this year. Each of these programs will consist of organization-wide initiatives, training and education. By adding a new corporate training budget line within the HR budget, funding can be allocated properly for these. And just on another note, with COVID pausing many of the HR projects and health and safety training over the past 2 years, we are forecasting a very busy and exciting 2023 as we resume our paused work and training. In addition to the equity, diversity and inclusion and the mental health and wellness initiatives, we will be completing a review of all HR and health and safety policy and procedures. We are going to be reviewing our onboarding and general orientation process, performance management programs, leadership training, and catching up and updating our health and safety training, for example, women's violence in the workplace and etc. This, by reallocating our line 1, we will also be able to focus and pay more attention and primarily focus on all these new initiatives for 2023. And with that, we can answer any questions.
Questions, council? Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Shelley. The $30,000. So is that the difference from the 2022 actual to the 2023 proposed here? That's the addition of the $30,000 for that HR admin and project support position?
I will defer to Jeff.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Shantz. That is the difference between the 2022 budget and the 2023 actual. So what we've done is what's happened for the past 2 years is we've actually had some staff helping the HR department that were otherwise in the corporate services department. It was never reflected in the budget, so you could never see that there was some extra help being provided. What we've done is we've actually caught that for the first time, and it's in the salaries budget in HR.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm not seeing anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Just a few more slides for you. The last thing that that's included in our department budget is the corporate overhead budget. We've included a miscellaneous line item for an additional search feature for our record software. It's something we've been looking at, again, with sort of a focus on records management in our office in the last year and a bit. Mr. Petherick mentioned this during the sort of start of the budget presentation, but starting even before we started our budget process, we've already had a pretty big reduction in the corporate services department with reduced revenue from the Ontario Municipal Partnership, or OMPF fund. So that's a $40,000 hit to our bottom line right off the bat. The other thing that I wanted to provide council with is we did include a laptop that is no longer needed in our corporate overhead. So there is $1,500 that could be reallocated to somewhere else. Actually, maybe what I'll do is I'll take any questions on the corporate overhead side of things, if there are any.
Any questions? Councillor Schwint.
On staffing costs, I see retiree benefits. That comes out of the general levy each year. I guess I was surprised on how that was funded. Not
Yes,
sure where to go with that.
I think I might have to ask Mr. Petherick to help me with that question.
Absolutely. So through you, Madam Mayor, within our HR policy, longstanding before I got here, those employees that were eligible to retire through OMER, which means they'd have to be over 55 and have been with the municipalities for over 10 years, are eligible to retire with benefits paid until they're 65. So we do have some staff that, and I would say fall within that early retirement, so between 55 and 65. And so they're caught up in this line.
Thanks.
Councillor Cadell.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the Director of Corporate Services. Woolwich is operating under a hybrid model as it currently stands. Have you seen any impact to the overhead from a corporate standpoint through the operation of this hybrid model? Are we incurring any costs for staff home office setups, et cetera?
So through you, Mayor Shantz, we are operating on a sort of a trial policy that allows staff to work from home. And one of the things we would like to do is, as Ms. Noble mentioned, is to bring that forward in our policy review to council, hopefully this year. As part of that sort of preliminary or test policy, staff are responsible for all of their own office equipment. So, furniture, so chair, desk, those kind of things. What we have seen is some increased requests for IT hardware, as well as when we look at our IT capital budget, a move for more flexibility with more laptops. So, and it's an interesting story. When the pandemic first started, everyone was asked to work from home where they could. People were bringing desktops home, monitors home, all the peripherals, keyboards, mice, all the sort of extra things that are coming with that. Since we've been, go home, come back, or even a work from home option that we've been given to staff, we've seen that change to a more laptops being looked for instead of desktops. And then there is a small increase in cost to those things. So not on the home office front, but on the IT front, I would say yes.
Anyone else?
Sorry, Mayor Shantz, we do have one more slide. And if I can just ask Francis to go to the next one. So when we were talking about a hybrid changing our hybrid setup to allow more public delegations to come into council chambers, council asked us to look for a secondary monitor option for council chambers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Mr. Girth to sort of provide you an overview of what we found, and if council wishes, we could look at including that in the budget. And he also has a sample here, so if any members of council wants to see what that looks like, he can sort of show you, and it's available after the meeting if you want to play with it. So Mr. Girth.
Yeah, so taking direction from Mr. Smith here. And so we looked at a number of different options for a secondary monitor, looking at the space that's available in the council room, the desk space, and trying to manage, the expectation of how big of a monitor is going to be enough. So when we look at kind of sizing and space, there are a number of what they consider portable monitors that are kind of used for laptops and travel and different things like that. So the one that I have in-house here right now is a trial. We purchased it as a test unit. Is basically a 15.6 portable monitor that has USB-C connection as well as mini HDMI capabilities as well. So has a little more flexibility than some of the other ones that I've seen that only had USB-C connections. This was a fairly decent price, just a little over $200 a unit. So as you can see on the side here, if we were to outfit, 11 workstations with staff and council getting a second monitor, along with any cables and adapters, depending on the device that you have, you may not have an HDMI output. So we'd have to get some adapters or different cables for it. So we're looking at about a $2,800 estimated budget for that to outfit the council room with secondary monitors for directors and the council members as well. we can add more if we want, bigger or, a different type. We can always consider other options, but this was a decent size. It's about the size of a standard, laptop that we usually give to staff. Yeah.
So thanks, Barry. Sorry, Mr. Girth. Just further to that, we also looked at some options for more flexible desks. So we used to have council sitting 2 per a fairly large desk. We've now moved that to 1, although it does kind of impact how the room can be set up. So we sort of looked at some changes to desks. That could be about $2,500. And then I'd really like to clean up some of the charging. That was about $500. I think that's probably a project for the future, a future budget. But if I can just ask to go to the next slide. I think we have a bit of a summary here. So $3,000 and $3,000 removed from the grants budget, or recommended removal from the grants budget. So there's about $6,000 there. Another $1,500 from minor capital. And then council may want to consider $2,800 in council chamber monitors, and otherwise the funding could be used elsewhere, allocated to the miscellaneous grants, and or used to reduce the budget slightly. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the proposal that we just put forward, or anything about the corporate services budget that we haven't talked about already.
Okay, thank you. Council? Councillor Schwint.
I guess I'm wondering what happens if we go over budget on a line item? So what's the policy if we have $1,000 for miscellaneous grants, we go to 1,500, does that come before council before you can go over 1,000? Is it found savings elsewhere in the budget? What discussion does staff have to move things around?
Mr. Patrick?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, that would fall for me to answer. So through you to Councillor Swint, if a budget line were to go over, it's the expectation from the director that they would be able to manage, I would say, first, third divisional budget. So, looking at corporate services, how they have clerks and IT and all that kind of stuff, that any overages would be contained within that budget first. If it couldn't be contained within that budget, the expectation is be contained within their department budget before it goes out from there. So yeah, if they were to go, say they had $1,000 budget, they did $2,000, they would need to find $1,000 somewhere else in their own budget. That's the expectation.
Anyone else? Any comments for Mr. Smith on his last question on the last slide? Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to the Director Smith. You're requesting feedback on where we may allocate some of those funds. Can't we just reduce the overall tax levy? Okay. I mean, that would be my suggestion. If we have identified that, everything that we have here is a need. Now we've had people rescind the request for funding. They don't need that money anymore. That should be translated on to the ratepayers. I would put to council.
Anyone else? No. I'm sorry, Schwinn.
I guess I just respond to that. I'm 90% of the way there, other than I think the miscellaneous grants. It's a very small line item, but it's also pretty tight to me. So having an extra $500,000 there and save it coming back before council for a small matter like that might be good planning.
Okay. Do we need a definite direction tonight or?
No, through you, Madam Mayor, we can sort of put that into the parking lot and we can have that discussion on Thursday.
Perfect. Okay, thank you to corporate services and everyone who presented tonight for keeping all of our corporate things going smoothly. And now we're on to Mr. Patrick to talk about council and committee budget.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I thought Mr. Smith and I were going to have a rock, paper, scissors of who was going to present council's budget. So really a
You
couple.
lost.
Yeah, I guess I did. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the biggest thing to highlight from your from council's budget is really within the training and development. As you can see in the budget, there was an $8,000 allocation in 2022 that has been increased to $15,000 in 2023 as the proposed. And that's just to be able to give council some flexibility to be able to go to training courses as well as conferences as you guys are starting to get your feet underneath you and acting as your role in a council position. So other than that, not a great deal amount of other changes within your budget, but happy to take any questions that council may have.
Any questions from council? Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to Director Plethoric. I think I got it right that time. Help me understand the operating material costs. It's gone up and down and up and down, and it's up now for this budget round. Can you just help me understand that?
Yeah, so through you, Madam Mayor, if you take a look at the detailed side of things, you'll see kind of what's contained underneath there. So there is meeting expenses, special events, miscellaneous, the rack and tag accessibility. I think you're looking at the actuals from 2020 and 2021, especially in some of the, I would say your miscellaneous and meeting expense and special events. During the pandemic, a lot of stuff didn't happen. That would otherwise normally happen. We would have the Bear State of the Union, we'd have the maple syrup festival expenses, with the mayor's breakfast. So there's expenses that would occur that otherwise didn't occur because of the pandemic. And we're just anticipating that things are continuing to get back to normal and we'd be able to get back out and do these community events.
Councillor Bryant.
One quick question. I guess this would go to Mr. Patrick. Why does council pay for rack and tag, or whoever answers that?
So through you, Madam Mayor, it has to reside in somebody's budget, and right now we sort of see rack and tag as a committee of council. And so the way the expenses work is it's a $50,000 allocation. We are able to have Lanxess pay for 40,000 of it. And then we have 10,000 that is coming from the reserve if we need it. We've been fairly good about keeping it within that 40,000 threshold. So it's kind of an in and out within our budget. So there's no net levy cost.
Okay, so what are we paying for then with that 50,000 or 40,000 or whatever it may be?
So that would be the chair of, and I will probably ask David. Yeah, David is saying it is it rack?
Tag. Rack.
Yeah.
Tag.
Is it tag?
I said
Yes,
tag,
tag.
but it's tag.
Yeah, it's tag. So the chair of tag, we have an outside consultant that actually leads that group through because it is a very technical, and so the chair has those technical abilities to be able to lead the committee through that. The other side of it is there are some admin support that's also offered to be able to make that committee function appropriately.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. I guess to you, Director Plethoric, along the same lines as that, is it revenues? Yeah. So in 2022, the actual revenue from Lanxess looks to be 17,000. Are we expecting a check to come?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, we actually are just finalizing a lot of our year-end invoices, and I believe that one has gone out. So you would see that budget line be pretty much up to like budgeted area.
Councillor Bryant.
Sorry, just one other question. Maple Syrup Festival is going live this year. I just saw the promotions for that. So are we going to be putting money towards the breakfast again this year, or?
The plan is to do that.
Okay, I just didn't
Yeah.
see a line for it. That's why I was curious. I
think
may
it
have
was
missed
under
it.
special events.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? No, okay. Thank you, Richard. Is there any other discussion? No. We had some questions last time. Was there anything that you wanted to respond to tonight?
So through you, Madam Mayor, I think specifically, I know one of the items that I still need to report to council on, and it is just being finalized, is some analysis on the debenture that's contained within the 2023 budget. So you will see that very shortly. Hopefully to have that out to council tomorrow. And that would kind of show what a 10-year and a 20-year debenture would look like, both from a repayment perspective, as well as what the total interest cost would be, as well as indicating to council what outstanding debt we currently still have on the books.
Okay. I had an email from a resident, and I know we covered this last time, but he was questioning the increase in the building department. So from watching our last meeting, I wonder if you could just reiterate that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So through you, Madam Mayor, to council, my understanding as part of the discussion was looking at the number of building officials that we have within Woolwich, and then looking at some, I would say, comparators of similar sized municipalities. The way I would approach it is not necessarily, in my opinion, a good way of looking at it, because again, when you're looking at people's or municipalities population, you're looking at the moment in time. So that's what has already occurred. Or from a building perspective, their job and their opportunity of their work is to actually look at what is coming. So they're doing the future inspections. That's why we're looking at having probably, I would say, double the amount of building officials, because we are in a growing municipality. So we're looking forward and seeing that the building activity is there and having that. So the other municipalities, I can't comment on what their growth is going to be looking like. They may not have the growth that we have. So therefore, the amount of building staff that they have within their municipality may be appropriate to them.
Okay, thank you. And also the building staff do not affect the levy as well.
Yeah, that is correct. Through the Bill 124 back in, I believe, 2005, it is a self-contained unit. So the building permit revenue needs to be able to offset the cost that they're going to experience. So it does not affect the levy at all.
Any other questions or discussion before? Councillor Bryant?
Thank you. This would be one probably Mr. Brenneman could answer for me, because I know he looks after fire department. The chief reported numbers on how many calls each station responds to. But some of those numbers, I'll use Maryhill, for example, because I know that one. They had 44 calls, and I'm assuming those are the calls that came into the station. It's not to the actual calls they responded to. Like, if a call comes into, say, Breslau, Maryhill quite often responds to that, or Conestoga will respond to it. So the actual numbers, I guess, that they're going out to are actually much higher than what was reported. Is that not correct?
I'm not sure I'm exactly following. I mean, a couple of things I want to just clarify. First of all, we're dispatched through the Kitchener system. However, to answer your question, if I understand it correctly, is if ultimately we're set up for a structure fire to do a 2-station response, then they're going to be paid for that 2-station response accordingly, and the stats would show up, in terms of that being one incident, if that's what you're getting at.
But that 44 number, is that not the calls that would have just been called out to Maryhill? Like, I know they respond to more than 44 calls. I believe their number was like 150, I think is what I was told. And this was during the election time. So I'm questioning whether it's 44 calls that came into the Maryhill station and then they've gone out, or if it's I'm not sure how they've come to those numbers, to be honest. That's what I'm questioning.
Right. I think in fairness, I'll have to get the chief to probably respond in an email to council
And clarify how that works,
to
because I know,
clarify.
yeah, because I know Mary Hill has gone out on more than 44 calls, and that's why it's leading me to question all the stations, if that's the case for all of them. If those are actually just the calls that have gone into the station, but not the total amount of responses that each station has made, because they will go out and help the other stations, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. You know, I guess the one comment I would make though is when I look at things from a budget perspective, you know, and having to rationalize things, you know, council talked last time about the fact that you know, there was concerns that, well, if you're doing a 5-year average, is that really going to be indicative of the, you know, if there maybe have been upward trends over the last 2 years? You know, but in fairness, we have to do that with a lot of our budget areas also to try and balance things out. We do that with winter control. I think that was brought up in Jared and Carter's presentation on behalf of Infrastructure Services Department. But as I said, I'll find out how we exactly record the stats.
Yeah.
Because as I said, I can see where if as I said, for quite a number of years, you know, I think we've been doing a 2-station response for a structure fire. So I can see that being one incident, but 2 stations have been called out, but I'll get the clarification.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I have a number of public notices, and then I'll ask Mr. Petherick to summarize where we're at and talk about the rest of the process. We have a notice of intent to discuss changes to the procedural bylaw. That would be that the Council of the Township of Woolwich gives public notice of its intent to consider passing a procedural bylaw amendment at the meeting on Monday, January 23rd, 2023 at 7 p.m. That would be our committee of the whole meeting. Yes. Notice of public meeting, January 23rd, 2023. And notice of a public meeting, January 30th, 2023. And notice of intent to discuss water and wastewater budget rates, that the Council of the Township of Woolwich gives public notice of its intent to discuss the 2022 draft water and wastewater 2023, maybe? Draft water and waste. I am paying attention to what I'm reading. Notice of its intent to discuss the 2023 draft water and wastewater budget and changes to the water and wastewater rates on January 23rd, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers situated at 24 Church Street West in Elmira, and on Zoom and live stream to the Township of Woolwich YouTube channel. You guys are trying to trip me up tonight. Okay, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Petherick to summarize where we're at and where we're going.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So through you to council. So way back now, just 1 week ago, when we started the budget process, some of the themes that we were still looking at, specifically when we talked about infrastructure services capital budget, is looking at, you know, and I think it was just not just their budget, but other budgets of whether we're looking at potentially delaying projects to be able to help kind of reduce the budget, and whether there's opportunities, depending on what budgets we'd be looking, or projects we'd be looking at delaying it. We may be able to shift some funding around to help lower the levy component. And of course, as part of that is also delaying projects from the perspective of looking at it from those projects that are requiring debenture funding to complete that. Council did talk about an overall desire to reduce the levy budget from its current 8.5% projection. There was some discussion around reducing it to 5%. You know, and we're going to go through the rest of this process and have that discussion on the final deliberation night, and some avenues that council wants to explore. We did take a look on last Thursday's meeting with regards to the sustainability coordinator position, and whether that's possible for that to be included and what that may look like, as well as council wanted to have some discussion with regards to electric vehicles, specifically for the billing department, as well as the charging stations that are required for that, and then some office furniture for the building department. And then tonight, looking at potentially reallocating or removing from the budget the 3,000 grants, so in total of 6,000, as well as Mr. Smith indicated that there's an additional 1.5 or $1,500 that can be removed from his corporate services overhead budget, minor capital, and as well as you heard from Mr. Girth tonight, potentially proposing some additional portable monitors and cables for council meetings in the cost of $2,800, and that would be added to the 2023 budget. So that is the notes that I have captured, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Petherick. Did he miss anything? No? Are there questions or any further direction you want to give to staff before our meeting on Thursday? Councillor Schwint?
I thought there was conversation around the fire department budget in terms of trying to be creative and on a training officer position, we understand the need for training, but is there ways to find synergies and other not cheaper, but more cost-effective ways of achieving the same goal? Looking for ideas within that department for that.
Okay. I see he's making a note, so. Anything else? Okay. Then thank you, everyone. That brings us to the end of our agenda. And I need a motion that the meeting adjourns to meet again in special session on Thursday, January 19th at 2023. Councillor Bryant, seconded by Councillor Cadeau. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Council, thanks all who participated or tuned into the meeting tonight on our YouTube live stream. I'll remind council to stay connected until we receive confirmation that the live stream has stopped. Good night, everyone.